you got to be willing to help first. You can't, and I know this is a business development podcast, but if people's approach is to go right after the money and to make the money, it's going to be unproductive. The money is a byproduct of doing the right thing and helping people. And even to this day, I'm on 2 to 3 calls a week that are potential prospects, and oftentimes I end up just helping them solve their challenge on their own because it's not a very good fit. And we'd actually be taking advantage of them to bring their products in-house and do our service. There's some situations where it's not a fit. And if you always have that give first, help first mentality with literally zero in expectation, when the time comes and you need help, they're going to give you the answers. People are going to give you the time of day. They're going to pick up the phone. They're going to talk to you freely like a friend. They're going to tell you about their problems. And then all you have to do is listen.
On this episode of Brews BizDev, our guest is Greg Shoemaker, president and founder of ARCA. Greg has grown 3 businesses before the age of 30. And so we talk about knowing which business is right? The importance of testing your business idea before investing too much into it, how to stimulate your own creativity, which might be helpful in these kinds of times, and also ways of deeply understanding and then helping your ideal prospect. Thanks for joining us. Enjoy. Well, thanks for joining us, Greg. How's your day going?
Today's going well. It's Friday. It's also Friday the 13th,
yes.
But no complaints on our end.
Yeah. And we are, this will get released later. So obviously people won't be watching it on Friday the 13th, but we're sitting here in the late afternoon on Friday the 13th in 2020. And so far, sounds like for you, nor for me, has anything gone totally off the deck, insane, gone wrong, catastrophe, right? So far, so good.
There's still a few hours left of today, though.
Yeah. Here's me knocking on wood just for superstition's sake.
Yeah, right.
Well, why don't you give us, we'll start simple. Why don't you just go ahead and give us your elevator pitch, right? Like what's the simplest, here's who I am, here's what I'm up to, here's what I do.
Definitely. So I'm Greg Shoemaker, 29 years old, born and raised Buffalo, New York. I've lived a bunch of different places, but I came back here about 6 years ago to start my first business. I've had 3 businesses prior to this, and finally 4.5 years ago we started ARCA. What ARCA is, we offer resale and recycling services inside the reverse supply chain. So reverse supply chain refers to when products are moving from customer towards vendor instead of typically where they move from vendor to customer. We have a very unique approach to asset recovery where it's almost like an apple falling from a tree, where it kind of hits the branch every way down. We have a very tiered approach where we can offer retail, wholesale, and finally auctions and recycling to make sure that there's a final disposition for all these assets that we bring in.
Okay, so let's just break that down into some layman terms. I mean, obviously people know what trees and apples are, I hope. But so when you're talking about reverse supply chain, what's a scenario where like a business, like here's a scenario they'd be in where they'd be looking for someone like you? Like what's the actual like on the court kind of version of that?
Yeah, a great example would be like a manufacturer when they're going to go and upgrade their manufacturing lines, their production lines, their other infrastructure or equipment. They bring in the new equipment. Well, what do you do with all the old equipment?
Okay. Yeah. So then they're looking for someone else to deal with what do we do with it? Right. Because there may or may not be someone on staff inside the company whose job it is to figure out what they're to do with old equipment. Right. So I assume that falls into operations somewhere, but probably not what businesses want to have their people paying attention to. Right.
Right, of course. And there are industries that do build their own internal asset recovery programs. Think of like Daimler Chrysler, releasing their first ever certified pre-owned program. Like in a way, that is a form of reverse supply chain. Those cars coming off a lease are now surplus to the owner of them, right? They're a used car.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I hadn't thought of that at all. Okay. So let's jump and then we'll jump back into the business. But the brew, your featured brew today is what?
I actually have Death Wish Coffee Cold Brew. that I make myself at home. I have
Nice.
it in a very special ARCA mug.
Excellent. Excellent. Yes. And here I am, not with Death Wish, so, whatever. But actually, I have had some of that, and it's very good. But this just happens to be whatever the coffee is that's in our office here in the branded mug. So appreciate the branded mug. And what do you like about Death Wish?
Well, I think the name says it all. It's very strong coffee. So I enjoy a very bitter, strong, almost like thick and syrupy coffee. I just take these little tiny sips all day. It's basically rocket fuel.
Okay, nice, excellent. And just for our viewers' information and listeners, I mean, we are late in the afternoon here, so you're still rocking some Death Wish post 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So how are your sleep patterns going these days, Greg?
You'd think they'd be crazy. They're actually pretty good. This will be my last mug of the day. I'll cut it off. I'll make it in bed by 10 o'clock tonight.
Nice. Okay. Wow. All right. So you bounce back quickly then. Yeah. You managed to get tired enough to overcome the Death Wish action. I like that. All right.
So we work ourselves to death, and then we drink the coffee to death, right? It's just the death all the way around.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, this is turning morbid pretty quickly. All right. So here we are on Friday the 13th talking about Death Wish coffee and working to death.
Talking about dead assets, dead coffee.
We're gonna have to come up with some cheery topics so that this doesn't become the theme of the episode.
Yeah.
So you've been building businesses for a few years, and you're not very old, right? So I know that here locally you made the Buffalo 30 under 30, I think a couple of years ago, 2018, right? So and you just gave the age, so you're still under 30, and you're in business number 3? 4. Okay. So what put you into the entrepreneurial path? And, what have you been discovering? Because obviously that's a pretty short time frame, right? And you've moved through some businesses and you're kind of moving up and growing these things. And from what I've heard about how ARCA is growing, it's been growing considerably, quickly, especially relative to some other businesses, especially in the climate we're right now, right? So what is it you think that you've been picking up along the way so far that's had the success start growing on top of itself? What lessons are you taking so far?
Honestly, the biggest one, and I was just talking about this the other day, you never want to be in a room where you're the smartest one. And it's not that you can't ever be in those rooms, but where you choose to spend your time, you don't want to always be the tip of the iceberg, right? So I leave work, I go home, I spend my time doing productive things like reading. I don't own a TV. I have several mentors, and I'm always out there sponging for that information. And even more importantly than that, I'm willing to admit like where I fall short or what I don't know. And constantly having that ability to do that self-inquiry is so important because the answers that you discover allow you to pick up that traction and really go.
Yeah.
Really, really go.
Okay. Yeah. So the keep smart people around, actually listen, right? That helps. Not just repeat.
A guy
actually
like
take
me
it on
needs
board.
it.
Yeah. Yes. Apply the lessons that you learn so that you've actually learned them. And what's some of the in that realm of kind of mentorship and people that you've got around you, and I'm sure there's probably like they're not literally around you in some case. Obviously you're reading books, right? You're consuming content, as we call it in this industry, from different places, but then actually close to you in real life. Are there any mentors who have made a particular difference that you'd like to kind of shout out and mention? And if so, what is it specifically that they contributed, do you think, that you really took away, like actual nuggets that you put into action?
If I would have known this would come, I would have gotten their permission. I don't necessarily know if I have anybody's permission to
all right, well,
shout them out.
You can give me the takeaways then. If you think that they might be dicey about getting shared.
Definitely experience and definitely the tough love, right? So when you're so close to the challenge, like when you're in the business, working in the business every day, working on all the problems, you get into this in the weeds mentality, right? And sometimes the answers to your problems are so obvious, and you need someone who isn't worried about offending you, and they can say, well, what are you thinking? Like, that was silly, or that was stupid, or do it this way instead. And that experience that they have really brings that to the table.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So hopefully you don't have to go through what they went through to learn the lesson, right? You can actually take it and take that delivery and then run with it.
Yeah, I call that being wise over being smart. Learning from others versus having to constantly learn from your own mistakes is crucial.
Okay. What so what's the path that brought you not necessarily into business, but from the businesses you were doing, what opened up ARCA, right? Like, what is it that you stumbled upon or saw or noticed? Like, what happened and you thought, oh man, reverse supply chain, I think there's an opportunity here.
Yeah. So at first, it was really just a side hustle for me. The business I had prior to this was very seasonal with our primary sales strategies. We were doing a lot of trade shows. We weren't very good at selling online yet. So mostly all summer, we were working, and then all winter long, we were kind of off. So I would dabble in equipment and surplus goods. Well, it wasn't until I stumbled into a big pile of surplus goods that things really started to ramp up, and I started to ramp down in the other businesses. And having to learn from not having a background in supply chain, recycling, asset recovery, any of that, having to learn how to sell this equipment, and having to learn the problems of the customers really brought this deep understanding for not only the supply chain, but the reverse supply chain and all the little different elements in between that make it come together.
Mm-hmm. And is there anything besides, obviously there's kind of like, oh, I think there's an opportunity here, right? So there's one thing about business and financial opportunity. Is there anything about what you started to learn or what got you into it, like why this besides business? And maybe it's just business opportunity. Like maybe it's just like, listen, I see a gap and so I built a business for it. But is there anything else like that just was particularly interesting or compelling for you about this business and industry?
Yeah. And it's no one else wants to do it, right? So everywhere you go, every startup community, startup event, everybody's got an app or a brand or a branding company. I mean, nobody is in these blue collar-ish type of industries. And for young enterprising people, there is considerable opportunity on the blue collar side of things. Our industry is full of 60, 70-year-old people still running their businesses, fragmented throughout not only the country but also the world. It's not a young man's game, and that gives us a really strong advantage.
Nice. Yes. Yeah. That's we've done at Renown a fair amount of work, working with what people call like boring industries, the things that no one thinks about when you're writing an article or putting a post together, or like, because you don't see these businesses. A lot of them are the businesses that supply other businesses and stuff like that. So it's hidden from like the mainstream view, and it's certainly not sexy. And it's all stuff that has to happen. Otherwise, these other businesses that you are familiar with don't function. Like they can't possibly exist with these things. But yeah, it's not the, what you bump into at the 43 Norths, right? Or the whatever is it's the apps and it's this, and like, it's the slightly better version of something that people have been, trying in the hundreds and thousands for like the last 5 years. Or it's all of we're the Uber of fill in the blank. So it's cool. I like engaging with people who are in businesses that can't get reduced to a simple tagline like the Uber of fill in the industry, right? Like where you actually kind of so here's the challenge. And I'm wondering like how you've overcome this so far, because it's different. People aren't immediately aware of it. And sure, the idea makes sense, but it doesn't boil down necessarily immediately, obviously, into some kind of like, we're the Uber of this, right? Or here's some thing that you already know that I can connect this to that might make sense for you, especially if you're not like a business person, right? I mean, you say supply chain to some people and the glaze kicks in, right? So have you found that to be a challenge at all? Like, succinctly kind of speaking, here's what we do to the people who are in these rooms, because that's what Buffalo is, that's what networking is the people looking for the sexy and the hot new thing. Have you found it challenging at all to say, oh, here's my elevator pitch on what this is, and have people actually understand?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
So what I've done is I sum it up to recycling. when people hear recycling, they typically think, curbside pickup, bottles, cans, newspapers, everything gets ground up and remade into new bottles. Well, there's a completely front end side to recycling of the collection, the consolidation, and just because it's not consumer waste like bottles and cans, that same process exists in the industrial spaces, the commodity spaces, the IT spaces, the same thing in every industry. But when people hear recycling, they just focus on your curbside pickups. So typically I'll use that if it's someone that's not super familiar with it. If people ask questions, I'm more than willing to explain, but I try not to give people too much right off the bat because there's so much to it, and it's such a foreign concept to a lot of people.
Yeah, which is often a challenge, especially with things that aren't obvious or like the hot thing at the moment or whatever, where like it's just not part of the narrative for folks, and for companies like ours, like that's always part of the challenge as well, right? You take this thing and how do you say it, and wherever that message exists, how do you say it in a way that it actually lands? And one thing that we've found, and I'm curious as your experience on this, is there's not really, you don't need to have a message that literally lands with everybody, right? There are some folks where, of course, if you're sitting there talking with them and they're asking them what you do, it's helpful if you can communicate in some way, here's what I do. But, it's not about everybody, right? It is about people who could do business with you, people you could help, or people who are connected with people you could help. Like those are the people that we need to have a good message for, right? Those are the people that we need to have a message that they can clearly understand what it is we're bringing to the table. And also those are likely to be people who understand some of what we're talking about. It's not some total layman, in off the street, so to speak, kind of like, hey, what do you do? In a room full of people just giving elevator pitches. Like they already have some level of understanding because they at the very least know their problem already.
Right.
So, what have you done? I would say, you came up with the recycling thing for like that general explanation, right? So for people who aren't in the industry or industries that would be connected to this, they don't know what you're talking about. And so you need some really simple ideas to kind of communicate the general idea of it. Have you found that it's much less of an uphill battle, when you're dealing with people? I assume you're doing some kind of outreach, right? To grow the business the way you've been growing it. It's not like you've just been kicking back and building it and then they will come, right? You're going out and talking to people. So when you're going out and you're engaging people who could be prospects, who could be your customers or partners of some kind, do you use the recycling message there, or is that confusing because they actually already know? And what's your inroad? Like how do you communicate, and what's the difference between that and the room of people who don't know anything?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So it really boils down to understanding their challenge, right? I was just on the phone yesterday with one of the most recognizable brands in the entire world. I can't say who,
Okay.
but the person on the other end of the phone, very nice, they had laughed and they had said, have you been eavesdropping in our board meetings? How do you know all of this and that? And, understanding that in this vertical, these problems oftentimes are identical, although a little bit abstract comparative to one another. They are very similar. And the explanation to one of these companies, these prospect companies, is really about understanding their challenge first. Someone that has new equipment that just never got installed needs a much different approach and a much different explanation than someone that has byproducts from a manufacturing process and it's commoditized waste on its last leg. You are much closer to recycling on that side than you are with the new equipment. And really for us, as you know, I'm younger, with a younger company. We've taken a ton of time to really fine tune our message, understand who we are as a business, what the value truly is, and then being able to relate that to the prospects is absolutely important.
Yeah. No doubt, no doubt. And that's again, these are notes that we strike often around here, and will forever, right? Because some of the fundamentals never change. It's like in sports, right? Where the fundamentals, and when you're not sure and the performance is in there, you strip it back down and you go back in there and you shoot those free throws, right? Or you practice the dribbling or whatever it is, and whatever sports analogy we want to use. And for marketing, or going to market, right, bringing a business out there, like job one is knowing the customer, understanding the customer, certainly their problems being a big aspect of that, and then the rest of it is in how do they engage and what are they looking for and where can you find them and all that kind of stuff, but all kind of irrelevant until that first part is done. At least a version of it, never quite done, right? Always iterating, always want to keep listening and adapt with those problems. But in my experience, so I wouldn't even say ours, and in my experience, certainly, as much as that's kind of obvious, and as much as that's literally like marketing 101, if you go take the the marketing course, it's like here's your target market, your ideal, it's right there. Start there. We don't. Right? Because either we start a business for some other reason, because we happen to be good at doing something, right? That's people start doing businesses because they're good at it, or they happen to like doing it, or they think it's a good idea. However it gets it started, it's very easy to move past that, knowing, or it's not really moving past it. It's assuming that we do know it already. Like we know the customer, we know what they're dealing with. And so then we just jump into which tactics should we use? How should we approach people? And whether that's marketing or sales, right? You're in a room like, oh, am I building the rapport, right? Am I mirroring when he's, it's like, which is, listen, you need tactics, you need how you're going to approach. But if you don't understand the customer and what they're dealing with and why they would want to engage with you, those tactics are pointless. So, to the point where I think we were given a presentation the other day, and I think knowing the customer or understanding the customer was in there like 6 times, right? We just kind of kept coming back to it and beating, and then still people ask about, okay, cool, but like what about tactics? And another question that comes up is, well, how do you do that? Right? How do you learn about the customer? Which seems, again, kind of obvious, but in your case, because there's a lot of different ways one can learn about what customers are dealing with. So beyond the talk to one answer, right? Go find one that you already have if you're already in business and talk to them and hit that deeper level. What did you do as you're starting this business and as you're just building customers? You haven't been in it for 10 years, right? So you don't have this big base. How is it that you went about learning and understanding and knowing what it is these companies are actually dealing with without being in them yourself?
So for us, and I think this should really ring true with a lot of businesses, especially businesses of our size and age, you got to be willing to help first. You can't, and I know this is a business development podcast, but if people's approach is to go right after the money and to make the money, it's going to be unproductive. The money is a byproduct of doing the right thing and helping people. And even to this day, I'm on 2 to 3 calls a week that are potential prospects, and oftentimes I end up just helping them solve their challenge on their own because it's not a very good fit, and we'd actually be taking advantage of them to bring their products in-house and do our service. There's some situations where it's not a fit, and if you always have that give first, help first mentality with literally zero in expectation, when the time comes and you need help, they're going to give you the answers. People are going to give you the time of day. They're going to pick up the phone. They're going to talk to you freely like a friend. They're going to tell you about their problems. And then all you have to do is listen.
Mm-hmm. That's all. Listen, apply, and move forward. And do you have any advice for someone, no matter what the age they are, but assuming it's a young business, right? And let's just talk about idea testing. You're thinking about getting into a business, kind of like you got some kind of a side hustle going, and then you're in that debate stage, right? About like, oh, should I drop this other thing and move into this? Because sometimes that can be a terrible idea, right? Because you might have just hit kind of a hot spot, and then you start going all into one lane, and then you don't actually have the good foundation, and something slips and then you're in a bad position. So if someone's not already entrenched, someone doesn't have conversations already set up, right, already happening with people going, like, how might someone go out there and find the right people to even ask those questions to, and then ask, and then hopefully listen, and then hopefully respond? Like, how do you get started if you're working with no one? How do you start?
No, it's funny. I have the exact same answer for this question that I did the last question. You have to give your time. You have to give it out first. Put yourself out there. Volunteer your time. Talk to people. Ask in a genuine way. Everyone says, "Oh, how can I help?" or "Let me know if you need help." People don't always mean it. When you say that, you absolutely have to mean it. Put yourself out there. You offer your time. You offer your help, and you do that enough, someone's going to take you up on the opportunity. You have to be present in that moment and just go along with that experience. And the learnings that you're going to get from that are insurmountable.
Okay.
It really does come down to give first.
Yeah, no doubt. And I'm, big proponent of that, as are most of the folks that we end up bringing into this conversation, right? Luckily, there's a lot of people who I think authentically actually bring that attitude, as you pointed to slightly there in that statement. There are plenty of people who say all that kind of stuff and they don't, that's just what you say so that you can then start having a sales conversation, right? And you can start kind of like badgering someone. But there are a lot of people, and it's great that there are so many in Buffalo at the moment, who work that, right? Like the give first, the find what you can contribute. We've all had our versions of it. So that's certainly, I've been a big proponent. And then there are caveats, right? There are pitfalls. There are times where if you're not intelligent about what's happening, where sure, you can learn something from it, but certain things hopefully you can avoid before you have to like learn the hard way, like being able to tell when something's gone too long, when there are people out there who will take advantage, right, and just kind of like keep asking for stuff. So would you say that there are anything for you, especially as someone who's taken the track of like just putting yourself out there, like, hey, if I can help, reach out, hit me up. I'm pretty sure it says that in your LinkedIn bio, right? Like any reason whatsoever, reach out and like, let's talk, which is awesome. Is there, any kind of guardrails you might put up or anything you can lay out there for people who might be listening? Because some folks might be so that person that they end up, doormat style, right? Which is not what we want. We don't want people getting taken advantage of. So is there anything that you've kind of experienced in your journey where you can say, okay, like maybe watch out for this, or, here's how to set some limits or anything, just so people don't get lost in the poorhouse giving themselves away?
Yeah, no, I definitely have one on that, and I'll finish it up with a story, but I'll give the advice first, and that is test all of your ideas for free. And in the instances where free is impossible, you have to do it as cheaply as possible. And a lot of new business owners, and myself is not excluded from this. When I first got into business, oh, look at this. I'm the leader of a company. I'm finally a CEO. I have a real business now. Everything has to be by the books and be official. And, several times over throughout my business career, multiple occasions, I had blown my life savings on either a website or a marketing plan or a new package or something that I didn't need, on an idea that wasn't tested and validated. And, today, with the way the internet is and the way social media is, there are ways to test your ideas without spending the money first. When people get started, the first thing they want to do is they want to go get their domain. And, people who haven't even done $100 in revenue are talking about trademarks and copyrights and, all this stuff. And your head is in the right place. Like, that is stuff that you're going to need someday. Yeah. But not until the concept is proven, not until there's something of value there. And not falling into that pitfall where you think you have to spend money on every little step in the beginning would really save a lot of time. Don't end up like I did in the early days.
Okay, good. And did you say there's a story? There's a specific story of how it went for you in the early days or something like that?
My first business, I invented something, and what it was a cleaning product for cell phones, electronics, computer screens. Just this little spray. You'd spray it on the screen. It'd be really shiny. It'd be really hard to smudge it up again for a while. You just spray it on. Well, the big pitch for this product was the hygiene aspect. It was taking the germs right off the screen. Well, I spent all this money, all this time, all this effort. I mean, literally my life savings. Like I was down to bare bones, blew it on a website, blew it on a Facebook page, a domain. I was exploring copyrights, having lawyers draft contracts. I had nothing left. And I finally produced some of this product and I take it to market. And I'm telling you, 5 out of 10 people did not care about the germs on their cell phone. They didn't care about how cleanly it was. I even had people, they would take their phone and they would just lick it right in front of me. And it didn't take, at that point, it didn't take long to realize that I had created something that nobody wanted. And don't get me wrong, we did take that business and pivot it towards something that people did want. We repurposed it for a different type of cleaning, and it was a hit. But when we marketed it as a cell phone cleaner for hygiene, no one cared.
Yeah.
Not even a little. Not even a little. No one cared.
Bits. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Test it out before you invest. Right. Testing before investing is
testing for free.
Yes. Yeah. Free, or at least super low cost kind of testing. And there's a lot of ways to do that. Like you pointed to, right? There's the free versions of putting stuff out during, the social, gauging folks, even like the landing page test version, which, is not hard to get that for free, but doesn't cost much to throw a one pager up where people can go to and answer a couple of questions and pre-order kind of things, right? A lot of people do those things. There are ways to test it before you invest in the paperwork and the slick website. And, to be clear, I'm sitting here in an agency, so I'm certainly not telling people to not buy websites or marketing plans, for sure. And there's something to do first. There's something to do first, unless you, for some reason, just have money to burn, then come see us. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, so, and actually, one of my recent guests here, we were in a similar conversation about even content creation. So even aspects of marketing, right? It's the same kind of a thing where like you could pay an agency to do for 3 months, 3-4 months, craft out this giant strategy. And then here's what we're going to do. And here's our plan. And then here's how we're going to reach these folks. And then here's what our content's going to be. And, in today's world, was his point, in 3 months, like who knows what's going to happen. So to wait 3 months to craft, some kind of static kind of strategy is insane. You can sort out I think he called it like a living strategy, right? Like a living, breathing strategy on the back of testing things. Start putting out content, make sure the quality is high, again, know your audience, know your customer as best you can, and then point some things there. But before you get totally invested in any sort of thing that you're doing, whether it's your entire business, like you're talking about, or how to market it, there's ways of getting stuff out there and seeing how it floats, right? There's ways of seeing how people respond to stuff and then build off that and use that to have a versatile strategy, a nimble kind of thing that works with you as you're going, which is, I think how a lot of businesses are trying to run now. Certainly some of the larger ones, it's a little tough to be agile and nimble, but it's, as we've seen this year, it's tough not to be. Right. If you're not able to move around, pivot, as we say, in different ways with the rapidly changing conditions of our world, you can get left behind really quickly. And it's important to test and change and just keep on kind of optimizing yourself. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a book that talks about a lot of those lean initial concepts called the Lean Startup. I'm sure you're familiar with it. Yeah, that may be a good thing for some of the listeners.
Yeah, definitely. Was it Eric Ries, I think, or Rise? I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, but yes, that's a great book and a great place to start, especially if even if you're not strapped for cash, frankly, like even if you have it, why blow it, right? Like develop something that if you've got the resources, great, but put them smartly into what's happening and take it from there. So I think, so you've been doing all forms of biz dev. And for me, and for the purposes of the title of this podcast, that's just like the all-encompassing thing, right? So biz dev being marketing, sales, customer success, outward facing, strategic relationships, things we do to grow and forward businesses in general. You've been doing different aspects of that, starting businesses, testing them out, some of them not working, so well, and some working better than others, and learning and going along the way. If you had one warning to give, besides the couple that we've given so far to people, right? Like don't invest until you test and things like that. For someone, and staying in the kind of entrepreneurial, doing your own thing, you're growing your own thing of some kind. If you, like you only had one warning to give, like the reverse genie, the genie of death, since we're on that theme from earlier in the thing, here's what you should do. Avoid this at all costs. What is it?
You got to check your ego at the door. You can't expect people to want to help you. You should already understand that you don't know everything and that you're not the smartest one. And if your attitude comes off as such, your ego gets in the way, people are not going to be willing and apt to help you. And when your boat starts taking on water, you're going to be the only one bailing it out. And I think the ego really plays a big part in that. I mentor in a couple different businesses, and I volunteer a lot of my time. And there's a couple of spaces which I won't mention, but it seems that a lot of new entrepreneurs are entering this space. People of all ages, all walks of life, and these are very small, like one-man band businesses. And sometimes some of these people come in day one, and they're like, "I'm the CEO, and you should bow to me." And within a couple of months, a lot of these people are left in their boat full of water. And it being an entrepreneur and being the leader of a company can have a great deal of pleasure that comes with it, but you have to check that ego and make sure that it doesn't get in the way. So avoid ego at all costs, I would say.
Nice. Yes, excellent. And that's I think that's good advice. And for the type of folks who are challenging advice for the kinds of people who are likely to put themselves out in front and try to build and lead and create something anyway, right? So there's that interesting tension, because if you don't have some ego, you're probably not out in front trying to bring something out there and having a belief that, like, yes, because I believe in it, like, we're going to go. So there's always this interesting tension. And I think our culture kind of sometimes, I'm going to say worships, right? But we love that person who's out, the visionary, the trailblazer out there on their own. And so people want to be that. And then ironically, you've got to kind of check some of that, right? You can't be so shut down that you're getting in the way of what could be happening, or you can't hear people's feedback, right? You can't hear what people are given to you, even when you're asking for it. You've got that dynamic of being strong enough to lead something forward, and being able to check yourself enough where you can still actually hear what other people are saying and respond to your environment, which is a hell of a line to dance around on a regular basis for people. I mean, obviously, I could assume I've had plenty of struggles in the same area, and you're giving it as your one key warning. So I'm going to assume that you've also, right, like, walked that line and fallen off one way or the other from time to time. So is there any tip? So, like, there's the keeping your ego in check. Is there anything that you'd say? And then here's a resource, right? So if someone's like, great, love that idea, how do I do that? Because I can't just start discounting all of my own thoughts, right? So, like, what's a good way or resource or structure for someone to help keep themselves in check without losing the edge that actually moves them forward?
Sure. And I would say, from experience, I would say at least 99% of the time I've been able to navigate situations without the ego so much getting in the way. I think it's more of something that I've seen to end up being the
Nice.
downfall of others.
Yeah.
A really good resource for that though is self-introspection.
Hmm.
Doing the work, asking the questions, looking inside. I keep a journal. I keep writing in it every single day. I've been doing that for years and years.
Okay.
I have dedicated time, uninterrupted, to do that. And it's not that I'm writing a story about my day. I don't need to write about the cheeseburger that I had earlier and the guy that cut me off in traffic, but it's a really good place to ask and answer questions. And it's sometimes, because you're the one judging, it's a judgment-free place to get those answers and explore how you are complicit in creating the conditions in your life.
Hmm.
Right? And yeah, of course, you could turn to a friend and say, like, am I being a jerk? But, it's not as meaningful as when you arrive at that answer on your own.
Yeah. Yes. When you discover things for yourself, it hits home certainly in a different way than that feedback. Cool. No, that's incredible. The journaling. Yeah, that's something. And you've been doing that as a daily for years, huh? That's nice.
Yeah.
That's another one of those, man, I should do that as a habit. Kind of habits. The Artist's Way. I don't know. Did you ever hear The Artist's Way? It was there's a book. I think it's pretty old. It's probably from the late 80s, and more for creative development, hence the title, The Artist's Way. And so this woman, I think Julia Cameron, wrote it, and it's a little program, a little series of workshops, this whole kind of approach to bringing your creativity out and kind of exploring and discovering who you are and what that juice is, and then expressing it into the world. And though there are many, many techniques in that book, the one that kind of really got traction and then became associated with it was the daily journaling. I forget that it even had some specific name that they called it. They had creative artist dates, and then they had this journaling that was like an every single day, block the time. You're not going to want to sometimes, all that kind of stuff. There's no form to it. And in that case, it was interesting. It was you do it for the whole time. It wasn't to the end of your thoughts or the end of your particular whatever. It was you just journal, whatever's going to come out, kind of like just get it out, because there's the introspection part, and then there's just the creating space part, right? I believe is how they would have worded it, where you just get the stuff out, and then it's not just circling around in there, and all of a sudden you have room for new thoughts, right? You have room to see things from a different angle that you can't see when you're just processing in the same circles.
Right. And one of the big things about the journal versus a therapist, a friend, a family member, these other outlets that you'd have to verbalize what it is that you're thinking about, is that hopefully, in your journaling, and especially in terms of creativity, you're able to defer judgment on the thoughts that you're having. And deferring judgment is one of the many tools that people can deliberately use to unlock the creativity within them. People sometimes think that creativity is this lucky thing. You either have it or you don't. And that's not the case at all. Creativity is a skill that can be learned by anybody, that can be taught, that can be fine-tuned and improved over time. And in those tools, deferring judgment is one of those. And I think it has a direct translation to the benefit of journaling. Hopefully, the journal's not going to tell you that you're a jerk.
Right. Yeah, hopefully. It depends on what you're writing in, I suppose, right? Hopefully you're not telling yourself that. Exactly. Cool. Well, I think we're good. I'm going to let you get on with the rest of your Friday the 13th here and finish your coffee up. But let us know. So where can people find you? Where do people find ARCA?
Yeah, well, normally I love visitors. During COVID, please don't just stop here. But you can reach me on my LinkedIn anytime. I believe my personal cell phone number is on there, as well as my personal email. You can reach me anytime. Willing to help out with anything.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for the time again, bud. Have yourself a great day. That this is some very valuable content, especially for those of us looking to unleash some of that creativity, because we could all use it in these times, right? New ways of doing things are called for. So thanks for the advice and thanks for the time, and we'll talk to you soon.
Sweet, Paul. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg.